with us today. So we are going to barrel towards a conversation with everybody's favorite broker, and that's Andrew Ginter. Andrew, thanks for joining us. Really excited to turn the mic over to you to talk about this. Better you than me.
Excellent. Excellent. So before we dive into the actual changes, I guess I want to talk a minute about kind of how this all works and how we land where we are today with some changes that are coming down the pipe in the next week here. So probably as far back as a year ago or so, we started having some concerns about a few things in the contract that we needed changed. And then usually that conversation leads to a few more things, and then a few more things. And so at this point, we have a small group of people that are kind of charged with looking over things and making changes so that we have contracts and documents that are as good as they can be for our agents. Right now, that group is made up of myself, Julia, Colleen Miklas, and Liz Kosminski. I don't know that we need the group to be any bigger, but that is the group. So if you have any concerns about something, or if you had a problem on a transaction that was ultimately tied to the position that was created because of the contract, please reach out to one of us, because that's usually kind of the starting point for how we end up making changes. Is we start to discover that we're banging our head against a wall repeatedly because of something in our contract that's just not quite the way it should be. So that's certainly what started the conversations around the things we're going to talk about today. So I believe we've got some slides that we can start up here, and then I'll talk through what each of these changes are. I think there's a total of 5 or 6 changes. So first up is right on the first page, trying to make it easy for us for any kind of seller contributions, which I know have not been overly normal lately. But I remember a day where they were on every contract, and I'm sure they will be again at some point in the future. So this language ensures that you will do it exactly as the lender needs it to be. And it gives you the opportunity to put in either a dollar amount or a percentage, depending on how you want to write it in. But that is, you see there the clip of that, it's on line 35. So it's right under where you've got price and down payment and earnest money. And the primary purpose for us actually creating a place for that, in part, so the language is in there for you, but also I think it's much easier to have one place that we're all doing it and we know where to put it, as opposed to agents kind of hiding it in different places on the contract. So the worst thing that can happen is we put a deal together with a seller and everything gets accepted, and then they discover a week or two into the transaction that on page 3 in the charges and escrows section, you put in there that the seller is going to pay $3,000 of the buyer's closing costs, and now the seller doesn't like that deal anymore. So we're just trying to simplify things a little bit here so that we don't have deals blowing up over misunderstandings. So next one up. All right, so this was the one that started the original conversation a year ago. So it's a little late coming, unfortunately, but it is finally here. I don't know how many of you had a problem with this, but starting right when everything kind of shut down, shortly after that, so in April, people would have transactions closing and they weren't showing up as transferred on the auditor's site or being filed at the recorder's office for weeks because they were behind and because they had made the process so much more disconnected that you couldn't, couriers couldn't run files in anymore, that type of thing. So transactions were closing, escrow was closing, money was being dispersed, and it wasn't changing on the auditor's site for 15 or 20 days. And there were sellers that were holding keys. So we needed to make a change. And I know Tiffany has been on this meeting and in other meetings in the past saying that the moment everything is dispersed, title is guaranteeing that the property is transferring. There's no need to be concerned about what date the auditor changes it on their website. So we wrestled with language for a long time with Cindy Lambert on how to go about doing this in a way that was effective and wouldn't just cause more problems for us in the future. So you can see the language in yellow there and the changes that we've made to tie transfer to the closing of escrow and the disbursement of funds, as opposed to the word filing or recording, being that that's something the title company has zero control over anymore. So that change, I mean, I can't tell you the amount of buyers I had to have conversations with where sellers were just basically shutting them out of a house that they bought last week, and they still weren't able to get keys. So this is big. I wish it would have come sooner, but we've got it now, and we're in the right spot. And I will say, I think we're still pretty progressive on this front. Most brokerages do not have this kind of language in their contracts. So I think this will be helpful to our buyer clients moving forward. Next one. All right. So we have decided to add the walkthrough language directly to the purchase agreement, as opposed to having a walkthrough addendum. In the pace of this market, agents seem to forget a walkthrough addendum at times, or any number of other forms, unfortunately. But the walkthrough addendum did come back to bite some people if they weren't using it, and then sellers were not letting people come back and check out the house to make sure it was still the same house before closing. So we have gone ahead and just put it right in the contract. The one difference that means for you in your practice is that there is not a signing off of a walkthrough addendum anymore after the walkthrough is complete. This statement just creates the opportunity for the buyer to do it. And by not notifying people that there was a problem, you have in essence removed the final walkthrough contingency. So the language on here is pretty much identical to the language that was on the walkthrough addendum originally. So as far as the way you explain it to people, you can continue to explain it the exact same way. It's just now in the purchase agreement as opposed to a separate piece of paper. All right. The closing disclosure is just, we're just making sure that we're stating that people need to review it. We've had a few people try to, not close right at the end because of thing that they somehow didn't understand or didn't know. So now they're signing off on that, saying that they understand that they need to review it. And the inspection section, this is something I believe is actually already in the contract currently that we changed and just kind of haven't announced, but general home inspectors need to be licensed in the state of Ohio. We had a conversation about this on a Tuesday meeting just like this, probably 6 or 8 months ago, if I remember correctly. So it is in the contract now that it's very clear that general home inspectors need to be licensed. It also makes it very clear that if you're inspecting something specific, that is not, there's no license required to inspect a boiler or a pool. But a general home inspection is a licensed job at this point. So you will run the risk if you use an unlicensed inspector, or your buyer wants to use an unlicensed inspector, you will run the risk of not being able to do any negotiating because you will have broken the contract and broken the law for that matter, because the state of Ohio says you have to use licensed home inspectors if you're a licensed realtor, and you have to recommend 3 licensed home inspectors if you're going to recommend any at all.
Let's say that a little louder and one more time for the people in the back. You have to recommend 3. They all have to be licensed.
Got to recommend 3. And I would encourage you, it is a terrible practice to schedule the home inspection for your buyer. Because when everything goes bad and all the plumbing is leaking on the first day they've moved into the house, they're going to call you and ask you why your home inspector that you scheduled for them didn't catch this. So it's really important you give them 3 names and that you tell them to do some research about the 3. I wouldn't even go as far as to give them any advice on which one you would pick, that sort of thing. I would say, if they said, which one would you pick, or which one would you have your mother call if she was buying a house? I'd say, you know what? All 3 of these people are excellent. You can't go wrong with any of them. Feel free to do your own research if you like, and feel free to pick somebody not on this list for that matter. But they do need to be licensed. So whoever the buyer's hiring needs to be licensed, whether it's one of the 3 you're recommending or not.
Every time I get that question, I just say, well, my mom is a licensed home inspector, so she wouldn't have to call anybody.
All right. So the representations and disclaimers section, I hope you guys already know what this paragraph always was, but if you remember, this paragraph used to end with a blank line that you had to write the word none on, or write the representation or disclaimer that was the reason the people were buying the house. So the purpose of this paragraph is just to make the statement, in essence, that regardless of any information that the buyer has received, whether it be from the seller, the listing agent, you, the next door neighbor, whoever, that those reasons aren't the specific reasons they're buying the house, but rather because they saw it and liked it, and that's all. But by agents not writing the word none in the bottom, it kind of negated the paragraph before. So we've just kind of idiot-proofed that paragraph a little bit and made it so you don't have to write the word none. The buyer is signing this contract understanding that they are not buying the house for any specific reasons that have been stated by anybody involved, like some of the things you see in there, like square footage or something like that. Because we've certainly had some issues where the house was marketed as 2,200 square feet, and then on the appraisal it says it's 1980, and the buyer wants everybody to be in trouble over that. And it's just not going to happen because it's not within our realm to guarantee that kind of information.
So Andrew, what's the timeline on, before we jump to the next section, what's the timeline on some of these changes taking root? Like, when am I going to see a different document in my .loop DocuSign? How else will you tell me about it?
So you will, there'll be emails that go out from either Julie or Carrie, just kind of announcing the day officially when they've changed over. We don't unfortunately have full control over when the document shows up in DocuSign and .loop, but I believe the expectation is that the new contract will be in DocuSign either end of this week or very beginning of next. And for .loop users, it may take a little bit longer, just because .loop seems to take a little bit longer to take our form and put all the check boxes and everything in it to put it in the system for us. But so do note, watch for that email sometime over the next, say, 7 days, because if you're currently using if you've got your own what would you call that, like buyer package,
yeah,
in .loop or DocuSign for that matter, the contract will be the old one. So you'll need to make sure that you do need to make that change. If you're using the brokerage's buyer package, then this new document will be in that package when it changes. So again, it'll be, because we don't have control over the last part of the process, it could be Friday or Monday in DocuSign, and I think end of next week for .loop.
Now, all of our agents are explaining all lines of the contract every single time to all of their clients. But if there was one thing that you would have them put extra special attention on based on these changes that maybe, could be something significant to come back to bite them potentially, what's the thing that you're like, hey, look, big change here. Make sure this registers with your clients.
Big change here. Amongst these changes, I mean, I think that the only one the client really feels is the language around what closing means.
Right on.
And I'm not even sure that they feel it, because a buyer and seller understand closing to be whatever their agent tells them, right? I mean, they know when they get the phone call from their agent that it's closed, right? So I think that's more important, that amongst agents, we understand between buyer's agent and listing agent that this is what the contract says about what the moment of closing is. And so if possession is transferring at closing, then this is what we've defined closing as.
Right. And so, Debbie Garson dropped in the chat, it's important that everybody understand what exactly does disbursement mean. Like, if I can't see the money in my account, has it dispersed?
Yeah. So this is actually the reason we picked the word disbursement, was because this is the only concrete event that we can tie closing to, right? So literally the moment the title company is hitting the button to send the wire, that's the moment the money is no longer in the title company's possession. So that's the moment disbursement exists. And that's something we can document. Like if we have to call Jade and get that, because we need to protect ourselves because somebody's saying it didn't happen, like that's something that we can document with a timestamp that says at 2:37 and 24 seconds on June 14th, the wire went out. So that's the moment that the title company officially had a completed package and the lender agreed and money was brought in and then it was sent out.
Right.
So that's the reason for the word disbursement specifically, because that's the only concrete moment in time that we can tie this to.
So for anybody who has the seller that says, well, I don't want to deliver keys, or I don't want to do XYZ because I can't see the money. Disbursement means that it is traveling through cyberspace on the way to their accounts. And that is, per our contract, the definition of closing.
Yeah. And we can get that from the title company if needed.
Right.
If somebody says like, I still don't believe it, that's something the title company can provide to say, like, we sent you the money at this time. And as far as wires go, that means it's going to show up in your bank sometime between the next hour and the next 14 hours, I guess, depending on the time of day or depending on the bank.
Right.
But yeah,
right.
that's the reason for it, because we needed something specific. And I've got a little secret to tell you that title companies have been doing this forever and telling people stuff is closed and everybody's been happy with it. But then because all of a sudden we went from like a 2 or 3 hour gap with the recorder to a 2 or 3 week gap with the recorder, all of a sudden this became a huge problem that everybody was worked up about. So that's the reason for the language changes, because it just, when it was a 2 hour lag, the title company just did what they did and didn't tell anybody. Now that it's a 2 week lag, everybody knows that it hasn't officially been recorded. So we need to change the language. All
right, terrific. And then the long-awaited, heavily touted septic addendum.
So one thing in the contract, we did not show the small change in the purchase agreement tied to the septic addendum, which is now next to the septic inspection on the inspection selection page. In parentheses, it's going to say see septic addendum. And the primary purpose of that is to kind of create the trip hazard for agents to be using the septic addendum if there's a septic system, right? So now you can flip to the septic addendum. I'm not going to go into great detail about this because it would take another 20 or 30 minutes. Every situation is different and every county is different. This addendum will work in every county, so this is not Geauga specific or anything like that. What I will say is if you are selling a house with a septic system and you're unfamiliar with that process, please, please, please call me or call an agent that does a lot of business in areas where there's septics. It is not hard, but it is specific. So you have to make sure you do the right things. It's not hard, but you have to make sure you do the right things up front and you're creating the right expectations. That's entirely what this addendum is about, is creating the right expectations so that buyer and seller are on the same page with how a septic inspection, whether it be private or with the county, is going to take place and who's going to be responsible for what is really the purpose of this document.
And there's the rest of it.
Yeah, there she is. It's a one-page document. It really it goes through there's 3 choices. One is seller's going to do the inspection and make sure everything is good. Another choice is buyer's buying it as is and they understand that. And another choice is similar to option 1, but is really tied more to if the inspection can't be done, because that's a much more detailed process. So option 1 and option 3 create a scenario where the seller's responsible. Option 3 just creates a little more legwork because of, like, say, not being able to do the inspection in the winter time, or because the house is vacant for more than 30 days, which seems to happen constantly.
Yeah. And for everybody who's on the call, who's, you're like, I don't even know what a septic is, or I've never done a deal with septic. I want to reiterate Andrew's point around, if you're in a deal that has it, you are better off raising your hand, calling Andrew, myself, and connecting with another agent, throwing something on the Facebook group, and just saying, hey, I'm running into my first septic deal. Who has a few minutes to chat? It will save you a lot of work on the back end and ensure that you are taking advantage of the culture here to get the assistance that you need to help your clients. So don't shy away from doing that. Cool. Andrew, any final remarks for the good of the order here, my friend?
I don't think so. I guess I'll just kind of tie this all back to the same thing I always talk about, and that is, as Mike, I think, kind of joked earlier, that people are always going through everything in these contracts with all of their clients. it is important that you have some level of conversation about what's being said in these contracts, because otherwise people will make their own expectations about what happens as to when they need to turn in earnest money, or when they need to schedule the inspection, or what they do after the inspection. So it is super important that you guys are setting those standards for people and making sure they understand what to expect and at what time it is that things need to be done. So please be doing that with your clients. Don't just put something in dot loop and say, we got to hurry up, we got to get this over in the next 2 hours. Like, take 10 minutes and explain to them when they need to put the earnest money in and where it's going to go, and when they need to get the inspection scheduled, and what's going to happen after the inspection as far as just timelines, because you don't know what's going to happen. You haven't done the inspection yet, but it's important they know that it needs to be done soon and that they only have a few days afterwards, that type of stuff. Because otherwise people will just do whatever they think is normal, and most people, what they think is normal isn't normal at all. So that's it for me.
I love it. Well said, my friend. Thank you very much.
You.
And thank you to everybody on that forms committee. I know it sounds like a ton of fun, and it is, I'm sure, to parse through line by line. But a big thank you to those folks who are helping protect our agents and our clients.